Imagine a town where the most dangerous thing on the road is a stray cow or a pothole. This is Richwoods, Missouri, in 2002. It's a place of rolling hills, dense, whispering woods, and a pace of life so slow you can hear the corn grow. This is the kind of community where stranger danger was a concept for people in big cities like St. Louis, not for the folks living along the winding country roads of Washington County. Everyone loves a miracle, but miracles usually come with a price, a cost paid in years of silence, tears, and a nightmare that defied every law of probability. Before we get to the miracle, we have to talk about the day the sun went out in Richwoods. It was October 6, 2002. A crisp, sunny Sunday afternoon. The kind of day that feels like a gift before the harsh Missouri winter sets in. 11-year-old Shawn Hornbeck was a bundle of energy. He was a bright-eyed fifth grader who lived for the outdoors. If he wasn't climbing a tree, he was on his bike. That day, his pride and joy was a lime green mountain bike, a flash of neon against the autumn browns and oranges of the rural landscape. Shawn asked his mom, Pam, and his stepdad, Craig, if he could ride over to a friend's house. You can almost hear the click of the kickstand and the crunch of gravel as he pedaled away. His parents watched him go, a small figure on a bright bike, full of the invincibility of childhood. They had no reason to worry. The route was short. The neighbors were friends. The world was safe. But safety is an illusion that can be shattered by a single turn of a tire. When the hour Shawn was supposed to be home came and went, the atmosphere in the Akers household shifted. At first, it was just the typical annoyance. Maybe he lost track of time, maybe they were playing one last video game. But as 10 minutes turned into 30, and 30 turned into 45, a cold, heavy weight began to settle in Pam's chest. It's a feeling every parent knows in their nightmares, but few ever have to face in reality. It's the mother's intuition, a biological alarm system that screams when the air suddenly feels too quiet. Pam and Craig didn't wait. They jumped into their car and began driving the route, calling Shawn's name into the thinning afternoon light. They scanned every ditch, every driveway, every cluster of trees. They expected to see him cresting the next hill, perhaps a bit sheepish about being late. But the road was empty. The friend's house? He never made it there. The lime green bike? Vanished. It was as if Shawn had been snatched right off the face of the earth by an invisible hand. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the Missouri woods, the panic was no longer a simmer. It was a boiling, terrifying reality. They called the police. The Washington County Sheriff's Department didn't treat this like a runaway case. They knew Shawn. They knew the family. An 11-year-old doesn't just disappear on a short bike ride in a town where everyone is watching. As the community began to mobilize, a chilling detail emerged. A witness mentioned seeing a white pickup truck. It's the most common vehicle in rural Missouri, a needle in a haystack of white paint and rusted fenders. But this truck felt wrong. It was out of place, moving with a predatory slowness that didn't match the rhythm of a Sunday afternoon. No license plate was caught. No face was seen. Just a white ghost haunting the periphery of a tragedy. As the first night fell, the search for Shawn Hornbeck became a battle against the elements and the clock. Hundreds of volunteers arrived with flashlights, their beams cutting through the dark woods like desperate lighthouse signals. They called his name until their voices were hoarse. Shawn. Shawn. The only reply was the rustle of dry leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The FBI was called in. The Missouri State Highway Patrol joined the fray. An Amber Alert, a system still in its infancy in 2002, was broadcast across the region. Imagine being Pam or Craig that night, sitting in a silent house, staring at Shawn's empty bed, knowing that every minute that passed made the odds of a happy ending dwindle. The school photos were printed into posters, a smiling boy with brown hair and a look of pure innocence. That smile was about to become the face of a mystery that would haunt Missouri for half a decade. The search area expanded. Dogs were brought in to sniff the trails. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras buzzed overhead, looking for a heat signature in the cooling forest. But the woods kept their secrets. No bike, no clothing, no signs of a struggle. It was the perfect, terrifying vanishing act. Little did the searchers know, as they combed the ravines and checked the abandoned barns, that the answer wasn't in the woods. The answer was already miles away, hidden behind a locked door, in a world that Shawn Hornbeck was just beginning to realize was his new, horrific reality. The search was just beginning, but for Shawn, the world as he knew it had already ended. The first week after child disappears is a blur of adrenaline and activity. But when that week turns into a month, and that month turns into a year, the adrenaline dies, replaced by a grueling, soul-crushing endurance test. Most stories of abduction end within 48 hours, either with a rescue or a recovery. But Shawn Hornbeck's story was different. It defied the statistics. As the winter of 2002 settled over Richwoods, the massive search parties began to thin out. The media trucks packed up their satellite dishes and moved on to the next headline. The missing posters on the telephone poles began to fade under the relentless Missouri rain and sun. But for Pam and Craig Akers, there was no moving on. If you want to know what true strength looks like, look at the Akers family. They refused to let the world forget their son. They knew that in the eyes of the public, a missing child eventually becomes a cold case, a folder in a dusty filing cabinet. To prevent that, they launched the Shawn Hornbeck Foundation. It wasn't just a charity, it was a war room. They organized annual walks, candlelight vigils, and fundraisers. They became experts in the mechanics of searching, training volunteers in grid patterns and evidence preservation. They were doing the work of a small army because they believed, with a ferocity that bordered on the supernatural, that Shawn was still out there. Imagine the mental gymnastics required to survive that kind of limbo. Every time the phone rang, your heart stopped. Was it the police? Was it a ransom demand? Was it a tip? Every time a body was found in a neighboring state, you had to hold your breath and wait for the dental records to come back. And yet, when the news was not Shawn, you felt a sickening sense of relief mixed with a fresh wave of guilt. They appeared on every talk show that would have them, from local news to national programs like the Montel Williams Show. They even sat across from psychics who claimed to see Shawn in wooded areas near water, a description that applies to about 90% of the Midwest. It was a desperate search for a needle in a global haystack. Investigators, meanwhile, were hitting wall after wall. They had logged thousands of hours. They had re-interviewed every neighbor and checked every registered sex offender in a 50-mile radius. The white truck remained the only lead, but in a state where white pickups are as common as blades of grass, it was a dead end. What makes the Hornbeck case so frustrating in hindsight is how close the answer was. The kidnapper wasn't a drifter from another state. He wasn't a faceless monster living in a cave. He was a man with a job, a car, and an apartment. He was hiding in plain sight, blending into the suburban fabric of a town just 4 to 5 minutes away. As the years ticked by, 2003, 2004, 2005, Shawn's 11th birthday was a distant memory. He turned 12, then 13, then 14 in captivity. Back in Richwoods, his bedroom remained exactly as he had left it. The lime green bike was still missing, a ghost in the machinery of the investigation. This was the era of the milk carton kids, but Shawn's face stayed on the posters longer than most. The community of Richwoods never gave up, but the silence from the investigation was deafening. The FBI's behavioral analysts were stumped. If this was a stranger abduction, why hadn't a body been found? If it was a runaway, why hadn't he reached out to anyone? The truth was far more complex and far more chilling than anyone could have imagined. While the world was looking for a boy, Shawn was being forced to grow into a young man under the thumb of a predator who used psychological warfare to keep him caged. The walls of his prison weren't made of iron bars, they were made of threats. Threats against his parents. Threats that if he ran, his family would be the next to pay the price. It was a masterclass in coercive control. By 2006, the trail was as cold as a Missouri January. The foundation was still active, but the hope was becoming a quiet, flickering candle rather than the roaring fire it once was. The public had largely accepted that Shawn Hornbeck was a tragedy of the past. But fate has a strange way of looping back on itself. Just as the world was ready to close the book on Shawn, another family's nightmare was about to begin. And that second nightmare would be the key that finally unlocked Shawn's prison. A school bus stop, a split-second observation, and a 13-year-old boy named Ben would soon collide with Shawn's world, sparking a chain reaction that would lead to the Missouri miracle. But before the rescue, there was one more act of violence that would change everything. January 2007. 4 years and 3 months had crawled by since Shawn Hornbeck disappeared into the Missouri woods. In the world of missing children, 4 years is an eternity. It is usually the point where even the most optimistic investigators start using the past tense. But while the world had changed, the iPhone was about to be unveiled, the Iraq War was at its peak, the nightmare in Missouri was about to hit a terrifying reset button. They say lightning doesn't strike twice, but in the rural outskirts of St. Louis, a predator was about to prove that lightning, or rather, a white pickup truck, could strike again with surgical, horrifying precision. The scene shifts 70 miles east of Shawn's hometown to a quiet community called Beaufort. It was January 8th, a Monday morning that felt like a block of ice. 13-year-old Ben Ownby was doing what every other kid in town was doing, trudging toward the end of a gravel lane to catch the school bus. Ben was the quintessential good kid, basketball player, gamer, a solid student with a bright future. He walked that lane every single day. It was a routine so mundane it was practically invisible. But that morning, the routine was being watched. From behind the tinted windshield of an aging white Nissan pickup, a pair of eyes followed the boy's every step. This is where the story takes a turn that still gives investigators chills. Standing nearby was 17-year-old Mitchell Holt. Mitchell wasn't supposed to be the hero that day. He was just a teenager home on a school break, waiting for his own ride. He saw the white truck. He saw it pull up to Ben. He saw Ben get inside. In a small town, you don't immediately think kidnapping. You think maybe that's his uncle or maybe he's getting a ride because of the cold. But then, as the truck began to pull away, Mitchell heard it. A muffled, desperate cry. A sound that didn't belong in a quiet Monday morning. It was brief, a flicker of vocalized panic, but it was enough. Mitchell didn't just stand there. He did something that thousands of people fail to do in crisis. He observed. He looked at the truck. He looked at the camper shell. And most importantly, he looked at the license plate. Within minutes, the Ownby household was in a state of absolute collapse. Ben hadn't made it to school. Mitchell told Ben's mother, Doris, what he saw. The 911 call was placed, and this time, the system was ready. Unlike 2002, the Amber Alert system in 2007 was a well-oiled machine. Within hours, Ben's face was on every television screen in the state. Highway signs that usually displayed traffic times were now flashing a description that felt hauntingly familiar. White pickup truck. White male driver. 13-year-old boy. The air in Missouri felt thick with a collective not again. The ghost of Shawn Hornbeck hung over the search for Ben Ownby like a warning. But this time, the trail wasn't cold. Mitchell Holt had given the police a gift, the letters AJ. A partial license plate. It was a thread, and the FBI, the Highway Patrol, and the Franklin County Sheriff's Department began to pull on it with everything they had. They weren't just looking for a boy anymore. They were hunting a monster who had grown bold enough to snatch a child in broad daylight in front of witnesses. Imagine a room full of federal agents and local cops, eyes bloodshot, staring at DMV databases, cross-referencing every white Nissan pickup in a 3-state area that started with AJ. It was a race against a clock that was already ticking toward a dark conclusion. As the first 24 hours passed, the fear was that Ben would become another Shawn, a photo on a flyer that eventually fades into the background. But the AJ lead was narrowing. The investigators were filtering by height, by weight, and by criminal history. They were looking for a needle, but the needle was starting to glow. As they worked the list, a name appeared. A man who lived in Kirkwood. A man who worked at a pizza parlor. A man whose truck matched every single detail Mitchell Holt had provided. They didn't know it yet, but they weren't just closing in on Ben Ownby's kidnapper. They were about to stumble into a secret that would shock the entire nation. While the police were frantically scouring databases, 41-year-old Michael Devlin was living his normal life. This is the part of the story that truly disturbs the psyche. Devlin wasn't a man living in a bunker in the woods. He was the night manager at Emo's Pizza in Kirkwood. He was the guy who made sure your thin-crust pepperoni was delivered on time. He was described by co-workers as quiet, reliable, and maybe a bit awkward. He was a man who blended into the beige background of suburban St. Louis so perfectly that he was practically invisible. But by January 11th, 4 days after Ben Ownby disappeared, the invisibility cloak was starting to fray. The task force had narrowed their list of thousands down to a handful, and Michael Devlin was at the very top. He owned a 2002 white Nissan pickup. His license plate? It started with AJ. He matched the description of the heavyset man Mitchell Holt had seen. The police didn't want to spook him. They knew that in kidnapping cases, the most dangerous moment for the victim is when the kidnapper feels the net closing in. They needed a way to get close to him without tipping their hand. They found their opening in a minor probation violation from an old traffic offense. It was a paperwork arrest, the kind of thing cops usually ignore, but today, it was their golden ticket. On the afternoon of January 12th, a team of plainclothes officers and FBI agents pulled into the parking lot of the Forest Apartments on Jeffco Boulevard. They watched the white truck. They saw the camper shell. It was a perfect match for the vehicle that had snatched Ben. They walked up to the second-floor apartment, their hearts hammering against their ribs. They weren't just there for a probation violator. They were there for a potential child killer. When Devlin opened the door, the atmosphere shifted. He was sweating. Even in the dead of a Missouri winter, with the heat turned down, Michael Devlin was leaking anxiety. He stepped out onto the walkway to talk to the officers. He was polite, but his eyes were darting, searching for an exit that didn't exist. They asked him about his whereabouts on Monday. He lied. They asked him if he knew anything about a missing boy in Beaufort. He denied it. But then, Devlin did something that investigators still talk about in hushed tones. He tried to offer a reason for why there might be movement in his apartment. "I have a godson staying with me," Devlin said, his voice steady but thin. "His name is Shawn." At that moment, the world stopped spinning for the officers on that walkway. Shawn. It was a common name, sure. But in Missouri, in a kidnapping investigation, that name was a lightning bolt. They didn't show it. They didn't react. They played the role of the bored cops just doing a routine check. They arrested Devlin on the probation warrant and hauled him away, while a secondary team stayed behind, waiting for the search warrant that was being signed by a judge at breakneck speed. Think about the arrogance of Michael Devlin. He had held Shawn Hornbeck captive for over 4 years. He had convinced himself that he was smarter than the FBI, smarter than the police, and smarter than the thousands of volunteers who had searched for that boy. He felt so untouchable that he had snatched a second boy and brought him back to the same apartment. He thought he could just explain away a godson and the police would walk away. But the AJ plate had doomed him. The witness had doomed him. And the ghost of the boy on the lime green bike was about to walk out of the shadows. As the sun began to set on January 12th, the entry team prepared their battering ram. They had a key from the landlord, but they were ready for a war. They didn't know what they would find behind that door. They expected a crime scene. They expected a tragedy. What they found instead would become the headline of every newspaper in the world the next morning. The door was about to open, and the secret Michael Devlin had kept for 1,561 days was about to be screamed from the rooftops. The air in Kirkwood, Missouri, on January 12, 2007, was biting. But for the task force standing outside apartment 1429 at the Forest Apartments, the cold was the last thing on their minds. They had Michael Devlin in custody at the station, but the real mystery, the living, breathing evidence, was behind a nondescript wooden door. In every tactical entry, there is a moment of profound, ringing silence right before the key turns or the ram hits. It's the moment where the what ifs scream the loudest. What if the boys aren't there? What if we're too late? What if we have the wrong man? The officers didn't need the ram. They had the manager's key. At 4:30 p.m., they unlocked the door and stepped into a world that had been frozen in time for one boy and was a terrifying new reality for another. The apartment was dimly lit, smelling of stale air and frozen pizza. The mundane scent of a life lived in the shadows. They moved through the rooms with the practiced precision of a tactical team, weapons drawn, voices low and commanding. "Police, identify yourself." They expected a struggle. They expected a crime scene. What they found was a living room that looked like 1,000 others in suburban St. Louis. And then, they saw him. Sitting on the couch, illuminated by the flickering glow of a television, was a teenager. He was thin, pale, with long brown hair that looked like it hadn't seen a barber in years. He didn't jump. He didn't run. He just looked at them with eyes that seemed far too old for his face. One of the officers, an investigator who had stared at the missing poster of an 11-year-old on a lime green bike for nearly half a decade, felt his breath hitch. He asked the boy for his name. The boy's voice was soft, a ghost of a sound that had been suppressed for 1,561 days. "Shawn," he said. The officer pressed, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Shawn who?" The reply changed Missouri history forever. Shawn Hornbeck. There are moments in law enforcement that defy logic, and this was one of them. They had come for Ben Ownby. And in another room, they found him, 13-year-old Ben, scared, shaken, but alive. The mission had been to find a boy who had been gone for 4 days. They ended up finding a boy who had been a ghost for 4 years. The scene erupted into a controlled chaos of relief and disbelief. Radio channels that had been clogged with tense updates suddenly went silent as the message was relayed: "We have them both. They're alive." Paramedics rushed in, wrapping the boys in blankets, not just for the physical cold, but for the shock that was about to set in. As Shawn was led out of the apartment, he walked past the white Nissan pickup with the AJ plate, the very vehicle that had brought Ben into his prison. Imagine being those officers. You walk into an apartment looking for a needle, and you find a second needle that's been missing for so long you'd almost forgotten what it looked like. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a resurrection. But as the boys were whisked away to the hospital under heavy guard, the questions began to pile up like a multi-car wreck. How? How did a boy live in a crowded apartment complex, with neighbors and a job holding captor, and never get found? How did he stay for 4 years? The Missouri miracle was real, but the darkness behind it was just beginning to come into the light. The door to apartment 1429 was open, but the secrets of what happened inside were about to shatter the nation's sense of safety. While the world was still spinning on its axis, unaware of what had just happened in Kirkwood, 2 phones were about to ring. For Pam and Craig Akers, the phone ringing had been a source of terror for over 4 years. Every call was a potential heartbreak. But this call was different. When the lead investigator's voice came over the line, it wasn't the usual "we have no news." It was a voice thick with an emotion that Pam hadn't heard in years. "Pam," he said, "we have him. We have Shawn. He's alive." Pam later described that moment as a physical blow. You don't just process news like that. You don't just say thank you. You collapse. You scream. You feel 4 years of held breath finally leaving your lungs. Across town, Ben Ownby's parents were receiving a similar call. Their nightmare had lasted 96 hours. The Akers had lasted nearly 40,000. The 2 families, bonded by a shared tragedy they never asked for, were now racing toward the same hospital, their cars cutting through the Missouri dusk toward a reality that felt like a dream. By the time the families arrived at the hospital, the Missouri miracle had broken the internet before the term was even common. News vans from every major network were screaming toward Kirkwood. Reporters were knocking on doors at the Forest apartments, asking neighbors, "Did you see him? Did you see the boy?" And the answers were chilling. Yes, they had seen him. They had seen Shawn Devlin. They had seen a boy they thought was a son, a nephew, a godson. He had played video games. He had gone to the store. He had lived a life that was half normal and half hell. The reunion at the hospital was kept strictly private, but the details that leaked out were enough to move a statue to tears. When Pam finally saw Shawn, no longer the 11-year-old on the bike, but a 15-year-old young man, the physical change was jarring. He was taller, his voice had dropped, his face had matured, but the eyes were the same. The connection was instantaneous. For the first time in 4 years, the Akers family was whole. But even in the midst of the joy, the "why didn't he run?" question began to circulate in the media. It was a cruel, uninformed question that ignored the reality of psychological warfare. Michael Devlin hadn't just taken Shawn's body, he had tried to take his mind. He had convinced Shawn that his parents didn't want him anymore, or worse, that if he tried to contact them, Devlin would find them and kill them. It was a cage made of words and threats, far more effective than any iron bars. As the Missouri miracle became the lead story on every evening news program from New York to London, the focus shifted from the rescue to the monster. Who was Michael Devlin? As the investigation widened, the quiet pizza manager persona began to dissolve. Detectives were finding a digital trail of child exploitation that suggested Devlin wasn't just a kidnapper, he was a hunter. And as the forensic teams tore apart his apartment, they realized that the miracle of finding Shawn and Ben was only half the story. The other half was a grim journey into the mind of a predator who had lived among us, unnoticed, for years. The celebration was just beginning, but the trial of the century was already looming on the horizon. And the world was about to learn that the Missouri miracle was only possible because one boy had the strength to survive the unthinkable. The Missouri miracle was a headline that warmed hearts globally, but for the investigators stepping back into apartment 1429, the warmth was gone. It was replaced by the cold, clinical reality of a crime scene that spanned half a decade. Michael Devlin was no longer the quiet night manager from Emo's Pizza. He was now Subject Zero in one of the most disturbing forensic deep dives in American history. As the yellow tape went up around the Forest apartments, the world began to ask the darkest question of all: what actually happened behind that door? The forensic team didn't just find an apartment, they found a meticulously maintained prison of the mind. While Shawn and Ben were beginning their long journey toward healing in a hospital wing, detectives were tearing apart Devlin's digital life. This was 2007, the dawn of the high-speed internet era, and Devlin had utilized it to its most predatory extent. They seized computers, external hard drives, and stacks of optical discs. What they found inside was a library of exploitation that turned the stomachs of even the most seasoned FBI agents. It wasn't just about the two boys he had in that apartment. Devlin had been consuming and likely distributing child exploitation material for years. This discovery immediately elevated the case to the federal level, bringing the full weight of the U.S. Attorney's Office down on his head. But the physical evidence was just as haunting. Investigators found the contracts and rules Devlin had used to govern the boys' lives. Here is where we have to address the elephant in the room, the question that cruel commenters and uninformed skeptics kept asking: why didn't Shawn just walk away? He had been seen at the store. He had been seen playing outside. He even had access to the internet at times. To understand this, you have to understand coercive control. Devlin hadn't just snatched a boy. He had dismantled a child's reality. He used a godson narrative as a shield, but the real bars were made of fear. Devlin had convinced Shawn that he was being watched 24/7. He told him that if he stepped out of line, his mother, Pam, and his stepdad, Craig, would be murdered. To an 11-year-old, and later a 15-year-old, that threat is more solid than any brick wall. As the investigation widened, the 2002 disappearance of Shawn Hornbeck was finally being pieced together. Detectives reconstructed Devlin's movements from that October Sunday. They confirmed he was off work. They found that he had owned a different white truck back then, one that perfectly matched the vague descriptions from the Richwoods witnesses 4 years prior. Devlin was a hunter of opportunity. He had cruised those rural roads, looking for a vulnerability, and he found it in a boy on a lime green bike. He had then spent 4 years refining his tactics, growing so arrogant in his success that he thought he could do it again with Ben Ownby. The charges began to pile up like a mountain of lead. Kidnapping, armed criminal action, forcible sodomy, sexual abuse. The list was so long it took prosecutors hours to read. Devlin was being hit from 3 different sides: Franklin County for Ben, Washington County for Shawn's initial abduction, and the federal government for the digital crimes. The night manager was facing a legal onslaught that ensured he would never see a sunrise outside of a prison yard again. But before the justice system could have its say, the families had to face the man who had stolen their time. The transition from missing to justice was about to begin, and it would require a strength from Shawn and Ben that most adults will never have to summon. By October 2007, the Missouri Miracle was ready for its final act in a courtroom. The state of Missouri was prepared for a trial that would have been a media circus, a grueling marathon of trauma that would have forced Shawn and Ben to recount every horrific second of their captivity on a witness stand. But then, Michael Devlin did something that many saw as his only act of mercy, though it was likely a move for self-preservation. He pleaded guilty. The plea deal was a tactical masterstroke by the prosecution. By getting Devlin to admit to dozens of state and federal charges, they secured his permanent removal from society without forcing the victims to endure the secondary trauma of a public trial. Devlin sat in the courtroom, his large frame hunched, a stark contrast to the monster who had terrorized 2 young boys. He listened as the life sentences were handed down, not 1, not 2, but a staggering succession of life terms that effectively meant he was being buried alive in the Missouri Department of Corrections. The sentencing hearing was the first time the public really heard the power of the Akers family. Pam and Craig didn't stand there as victims. They stood there as warriors. When they addressed the court, the room was so silent you could hear the heartbeat of the person next to you. They spoke about the 1,561 days of silence. They spoke about the hole in their lives that no miracle could ever fully patch over. But they also spoke about resilience. They looked toward the future, choosing to focus on the fact that Shawn was home, rather than the years Devlin had stolen. The legal conclusion was swift and brutal. Devlin was sentenced to 74 life terms. To be clear, even if he found a way to survive for 1,000 years, he would still be a ward of the state. The judge didn't hold back, calling Devlin's actions among the most heinous the court had ever seen. But as the prison doors slammed shut on Michael Devlin, the legacy of Shawn Hornbeck and Ben Ownby was just beginning to change the world. This case became the gold standard for why you never close a missing person file. It proved that long-term doesn't always mean deceased. It revolutionized the way the FBI trains agents for child abduction rapid deployment. It highlighted the critical importance of that first witness, the 17-year-old Mitchell Holt, who saw a truck and cared enough to remember the plate. Because of this case, Amber Alert protocols were tightened, and community vigilance was reframed not as paranoia, but as a life-saving necessity. But away from the legal papers and the news cameras, the real story was happening in 2 private homes. Shawn was no longer the boy on the poster. He was a teenager trying to figure out algebra, trying to learn how to drive, and trying to navigate a world that had moved on without him for 4 years. The Shawn Hornbeck Foundation, which had been the lighthouse for his parents' hope, began to pivot. It was no longer about finding Shawn. It was about finding everyone else. The Akers family took their pain and turned it into a toolkit for every other parent living their worst nightmare. They proved that while a predator can take your time, they cannot take your future, not if you have a community that refuses to stop looking. The Missouri Miracle wasn't just about 2 boys being found. It was about the refusal of the human spirit to stay broken. As we look at the final chapters of this legal battle, we are reminded that justice isn't just about a prison sentence. It's about the first breath of fresh air a survivor takes when they realize the monster is finally, truly, gone. The cameras eventually stop flashing. The satellite trucks pack up and leave the forest apartments. The national news cycle moves on to the next tragedy or the next scandal. But for Shawn Hornbeck and Ben Ownby, the Missouri Miracle wasn't a headline. It was the first day of the rest of their lives. Finding a missing child is the end of a movie, but in real life, it's just the opening credits of a long, grueling journey towards psychological survival. How do you go from being a prisoner in a suburban apartment to being a teenager in a world that has moved on for 4 years? When Shawn returned to Richwoods, he wasn't the 11-year-old boy who had pedaled away on a lime green bike. He was 15. He had missed the onset of puberty in a normal environment. He had missed middle school dances, first crushes, and the simple, messy evolution of growing up. Let's be real. The world wanted to treat him like a porcelain doll. But Shawn was a survivor. The community of Richwoods, which had practically lived on his parents' front porch for 4 years, draped the town in yellow ribbons. It was a hero's welcome, but inside the Akers home, it was about the small, quiet victories. It was about eating a meal without fear. It was about sleeping in a bed that belonged to him. It was about learning to trust the sound of a door opening again. The media, however, couldn't let the "why didn't he run?" question go. This is the spice of the story that often leaves a bitter taste. For months, talking heads on cable news debated Stockholm Syndrome as if they were experts in trauma they couldn't possibly imagine. But here's the truth. What Shawn experienced wasn't a bond with his captor. It was a sophisticated, high-stakes game of survival. When a predator like Michael Devlin tells you your family will die if you speak, a child's brain doesn't look for an exit. It looks for a way to keep their loved ones safe. Shawn's silence wasn't a sign of weakness. It was an act of incredible, selfless bravery. He was protecting his parents from a distance, even while he was in the belly of the beast. While Shawn was navigating his teens, Ben Ownby was doing the same. Ben's ordeal was shorter in duration, but the intensity of the violation was no less profound. Both families made a pact early on: total privacy. They realized that to heal, the boys needed to stop being the Missouri Miracle and start being Shawn and Ben again. They turned down massive 7-figure book deals and movie offers. They chose normalcy over fame. Shawn went back to school, catching up on years of lost education with a determination that stunned his teachers. He wasn't just a student. He was a man reclaiming his mind. As the months turned into years, the physical scars faded, but the psychological landscape had been permanently altered. Imagine the first time Shawn saw a white pickup truck on the road after his release. Imagine the first time he heard someone knock on the door at night. Recovery isn't a straight line. It's a jagged, uphill climb. But with Pam and Craig by his side, parents who had never stopped being his fiercest advocates, Shawn proved that the human spirit has a factory reset button that can be triggered by unconditional love. By 2013, the Shawn Hornbeck Foundation had reached a crossroads. For over a decade, it had been a beacon of hope for families of the missing. But Shawn was no longer missing. He was a young man, an adult, carving out his own path in the world. What do you do with a foundation built on a tragedy that ended in a miracle? You pay it forward. Pam and Craig Akers made the bittersweet decision to close the foundation, but they didn't stop the work. They transitioned their resources, their training, and their massive volunteer network into the Missouri Valley Search and Rescue Team. This wasn't just a name change, it was a professionalization of the miracle. They took everything they learned from the agonizing 1,561 days of Shawn's disappearance and turned it into a tactical machine. They now provide trained K-9 units, drone support, and grid search experts to law enforcement agencies across the Midwest. Michael Devlin tried to destroy a family, but instead, he accidentally created one of the most effective search and rescue legacies in the country. He is sitting in a 6x9 cell in the Crossroads Correctional Center, while the people he tried to break are out there saving lives. Talk about a poetic ending. If you look at how missing persons cases are handled today, the fingerprints of the Hornbeck case are everywhere. Because of Mitchell Holt, the teenager who saw the AJ plate, law enforcement now prioritizes civilian observation training. Because of the Missouri miracle, the waiting period for reporting a missing child has been obliterated in the minds of the public and the police. We now know that the first 3 hours are the golden hours, and that an Amber Alert isn't just a notification, it's a call to arms for an entire state. Today, Shawn Hornbeck leads a private, quiet life. He isn't a motivational speaker. He isn't a reality TV star. He is a man who values his peace, a man who knows the price of freedom because he lived without it for 1,561 days. His story serves as a permanent reminder to every parent currently staring at an empty bed and every investigator looking at a cold case file. Hope is not a platitude. It is a strategy. The Missouri miracle happened because a mother wouldn't stop driving the roads. It happened because a stepfather built a foundation out of thin air. It happened because a 17-year-old boy in Beaufort saw something and said something. And most of all, it happened because 2 boys, Shawn and Ben, decided that they were going to survive no matter what. The lime green bike was never found, but that's okay. Shawn found something much better: his future. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into one of the most incredible survival stories in American history. If this story moved you, remember that there are still thousands of Shawns out there waiting to be found. Keep your eyes open. Notice the out-of-place truck. Listen for the cry that doesn't belong. Because as we've learned today, miracles don't just happen. They are made by people who refuse to give up.